The monitoring station, celestial-eyed, floated silently at the edge of human space, its crystalline sensors capturing every transmission from the curious bipedal species that had achieved faster-than-light travel centuries before the Galactic Confederation's predictive models anticipated. Commander Zixar moved his four-fingered hand across the holographic display, adjusting the sensitivity of the long-range cultural scanners. "Fascinating," he murmured, his gill slits fluttering with excitement. "They've developed another 300 distinct musical forms in the past solar cycle alone." Science Officer Telvac chittered in disapproval. "Their creativity is matched only by their aggression coefficient. The Council was wise to place them under extended observation." Zixar's blue-scaled skin shimmered under the station's bioluminescent lights as he considered his subordinates' words. The 17 species of the Confederation each took millennia to develop unified planetary governance, yet humans maintained their chaotic nation-states even as they reached for the stars. Their art reflected this contradiction, beauty emerging from discord, harmony born of competition. "Perhaps what we perceive as aggression is merely adaptation," Zixar suggested, gesturing to the screen displaying human cities, structures of glass and metal rising alongside preserved historical buildings. "They change rapidly because they must, not because they desire conflict." Telvac was preparing a rebuttal when the proximity alarm shattered the quiet observation deck. The sound, designed to bypass the cognitive filters of all Confederation species, sent both officers rushing to the main viewport. Through the transparent alloy, Zixar watched in horror as a Vorix dreadnought, jagged and black against the starfield, decloaked barely 1,000 kilometers away. "Impossible," Telvac whispered, mandibles trembling. "Vorix ships cannot penetrate this sector without triggering the quantum buoys." Zixar's training overrode his fear. "Alert the crew. Activate emergency protocols. Broadcast identification and diplomatic codes on all frequencies." The station's 23 crew members, representatives from 12 different Confederation species, moved with practiced efficiency despite their terror. The Vorix Empire had conquered 3 star systems in the past decade through brutality rather than superior technology. Their ships were designed to intimidate, all sharp angles, and expose weapons arrays. The diplomatic codes Zixar broadcast went unanswered as the first torpedoes streaked toward the station. The impact sent Zixar crashing into a navigation console, his exoskeletal reinforcement cracking under the pressure. "They're broadcasting," communications specialist Muriel called, her voice strained as she tried to maintain her gelatinous form under the shifting artificial gravity. "Audio only." The harsh voice of the Vorix commander filled the bridge. "Confederation spies. Your observation of our prey violates the territorial claims of the Empire. Your existence is forfeit." "Prey." Zixar struggled to his feet. "The humans are not." The second volley destroyed the station's propulsion system and breached the primary life support hub. Emergency force fields flickered as power rerouted through damaged conduits. Through the viewport, Zixar could see escape pods launching, only to be methodically destroyed by Vorix point defense systems. "Get to your escape pod," Zixar ordered Telvac, helping the injured science officer toward the exit. "I must ensure the data core is secured." Instead, Zixar stumbled toward the communications array, ignoring the warnings flashing across every console. In his final conscious act before the primary hull breach, he overrode safety protocols to send a desperate distress signal toward the nearest human outpost, an act his superiors would consider heresy. No Confederation rescue ships could possibly arrive in time, but protocol demanded the attempt. As emergency bulkheads sealed around him, Zixar activated his personal escape pod. The last thing he saw before stasis fields engaged was the Vorix vessel moving toward the human sector, its weapons still hot from destroying the station. His final thought wasn't of the Confederation protocols he'd violated, but of the humans who would have no warning of what was coming. The distress signal, compressed and encrypted, raced ahead at speeds even Confederation scientists had deemed theoretically impossible, carried through pathways in spacetime that only human FTL systems could access. Just 4 hours after the station's destruction, the quantum wake detectors on Zixar's emergency pod registered the impossible: ships dropping out of FTL. 3 of them, bearing unfamiliar designs that blended utilitarian function with oddly aesthetic flourishes. Human ships. Zixar's consciousness flickered between the pod's medical stasis and painful reality. Through the small viewport, he watched the vessels approach. Unlike the mathematically precise formations of Confederation ships or the intimidating phalanx of Orcs war vessels, these ships moved independently yet somehow in concert, like a school of ocean predators his ancestors had once feared. The largest ship, bearing the designation UES Defiant in human script, adjusted its position to match the pod's slow tumble. Zixar felt the gentle tug of a tractor beam, so precisely calibrated that it didn't trigger the pod's fragile inertial dampeners. Captain Alina Reyes stood on the bridge of the Defiant, her dark eyes narrowed at the debris field filling the main view screen. Pieces of advanced technology, unlike anything in human databases, drifted alongside the unmistakable evidence of weapons fire. "Life signs in the pod, Captain," reported Lieutenant Kim at the sensor station. "Non-human. Nothing matching known biological parameters." First Officer Malik's expression tightened. "Captain, this sector lies outside UEF jurisdiction. Protocol suggests. Find survivors," Rise ordered, cutting him off with a gesture. "All survivors. Deploy SAR teams immediately." "The nearest Federation vessel is 3 days out," Malik persisted. "If this is first contact." Reyes turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "David, someone sent that distress call using our frequency. They knew we were here, and they reached out. That makes them our responsibility." The medical vessel UES Mercy deployed shuttles with search and rescue teams wearing environment suits clearly retrofitted from mining equipment. Their approach to the pod was cautious but not hesitant, a careful balance that Zixar, even in his semi-conscious state, recognized as the practiced movement of those who had performed similar rescues many times before. The human team accessed the pod through its universal docking port, their tools making quick work of adapting to the unfamiliar configuration. The first human to enter, a female with darker skin and a symbol on her suit indicating medical authority, approached without fear. "I'm Dr. Martins," she said, activating a universal translator that cycled through languages Zixar had never heard. "We're responding to your distress call. Can you understand me?" Zixar's translator implant, a standard feature for all Confederation diplomats, processed the human language with surprising efficiency. "Yes, thank you," he managed, his voice weak from the pain of his punctured swim bladder. Dr. Martins scanned him with a handheld device, frowning at the results. "Unfamiliar biology, but I'm detecting severe internal trauma. Fluid-filled cavity under pressure." Her team worked with startling efficiency, administering what appeared to be a localized analgesic before stabilizing his swim bladder with a synthetic polymer clearly improvised on the spot. The material, adapted from some human medical application, bonded with his tissue in a way Confederation medical technology couldn't manage. "You came," Zixar managed through the translator implant, his mind still struggling to comprehend the presence of humans, the very species his people had been observing from afar. "Of course we did," replied Dr. Martins, her hand steady as she worked. "That's what the distress frequency is for." The calm sincerity in her voice conveyed more about human culture than years of Confederation observation. These weren't the calculating semi-primitives described in Confederation reports. They were something else entirely. The moment of connection shattered as proximity alarms screamed across all 3 human vessels. The Vorex dreadnought returned, weapons already charging. The humans exchanged glances, their expressions shifting to something Zixar recognized despite the alien features: determination. Rather than flee, Captain Reyes ordered her ships into a formation the Confederation tactical database would have flagged as tactically unsound yet psychologically intimidating, directly between the wounded alien and his attacker. "Get him to Mercy's medical bay," Dr. Martins ordered her team, sealing Zixar's pod for emergency transport. "Tell them to prep for unknown xenobiology." Through the viewport, Zixar watched the humans position themselves to face a vessel that could destroy all three of their ships with a single volley. The Confederation had extensive protocols for encountering superior forces. Retreat was always the first option. The humans, it seemed, operated under different principles entirely. General Krovac, six-limbed and imposing in his command chair, chittered in amusement at the primitive human vessels displayed on the Imperial Fist's main tactical screen. His exoskeleton gleamed under the red battle lighting, polished to perfection as befitted a commander of his status in the Vorx hierarchy. "Magnify the lead vessel," he ordered, mandibles clicking in anticipation. Their construction is even more primitive than intelligence suggested. The tactical display zoomed in on the UES Defiant, highlighting the obvious weld lines and mismatched hull plates that spoke of repairs and modifications rather than the seamless construction of Confederation or Vorx ships. 3 vessels, minimal armaments, reported Sub-Commander Vextil, her compound eyes rapidly processing tactical data. "Their shields are rudimentary. Phase disruptors will penetrate on first volley." Krovac gestured dismissively with his upper limbs. "Target their engines first. I want samples of their technology before we destroy them completely." His dreadnought, the Imperial Fist, had destroyed entire defense fleets with its advanced weapon systems. These human ships presented no threat worthy of his full attention, merely an unexpected opportunity to gather intelligence on a species the Vorx Empire had marked for eventual conquest. "Weapons locked," announced the tactical officer. "Firing solution complete." "Fire at will," Krovac ordered, settling back to enjoy the brief spectacle. Yet as the attack began, nothing proceeded according to simulation. The smallest human vessel, designated on their sensors as UES Resolute, released what appeared to be mining charges, creating a chaotic debris field that confounded targeting systems calibrated for precision strikes against military-grade shields. "Recalibrating," the weapons officer reported, mandibles twitching in frustration. Before the targeting could be completed, the medical ship, UES Mercy, executed a maneuver that defied conventional tactics. Rather than seeking safety behind its armed companions, it accelerated toward the Imperial Fist's ventral blind spot, dragging emergency repair drones that attached to the dreadnought's sensor array with magnetic grapples. "They're deploying." Maintenance units. Vextil's confusion was evident. "They're attempting to interface with our secondary sensor grid." Krovac's amusement faded as the tactical display flickered, sections of the battlefield suddenly obscured by what appeared to be targeted sensor jamming. Primitive interference. Compensate. Most confounding was the lead vessel, UES Defiant, which executed maneuvers no Confederation ship would attempt, burning structural integrity for positional advantage, deliberately venting atmosphere to increase rotation speed beyond what inertial dampeners could safely manage. "Their engines are redlining," Vextil reported with growing concern. "They're exceeding safety parameters by 200%. They're damaging themselves," Krovac realized aloud, his tactical mind struggling to process the illogical approach. "They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to protect." The battle continued in this vein, the humans using tactics that sacrificed long-term viability for immediate advantage, coordinating without apparent central command in ways that seemed intuitive rather than planned. When the Defiant suddenly disappeared from sensors, only to reappear launching a spread of modified mining torpedoes toward the Imperial Fist's command section, Krovac felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. "Target their alien passenger," he ordered his executive officer. "Remove the distraction." The Imperial Fist's secondary weapons array locked onto the medical vessel where the alien life sign had been transported. Before the order to fire could be given, the humans somehow intercepted the secure transmission. "Vorx vessel," Captain Rice's voice broke through on all communications channels, the crude translation program, somehow bypassing encryption designed to withstand Confederation quantum computers. "This is Captain Elena Reyes of the United Earth Fleet. The being you're targeting is under our protection. Any further aggression will be met with maximum response." Krovak's mandibles clicked in irritation. "You face a superior force, human. Your destruction is inevitable. Try it." Reyes responded, her voice carrying a quiet certainty that seemed entirely at odds with her tactical disadvantage. "And there won't be enough of your ship left to identify the species." The unfamiliar sensation that passed through Krovak's nerve clusters was one he had rarely experienced in centuries of military service. Doubt. These humans fought unlike any species the Orcs had encountered, not with superior technology or numbers, but with an unpredictability that made them dangerous despite their obvious technological inferiority. "General," Vextil interrupted his thoughts. "Additional human vessels have been detected at the edge of the system. Their signatures suggest military configuration." Krovak considered his options. The damage to his sensors and secondary systems was minimal, but the tactical uncertainty introduced by human unorthodoxy made continued engagement a risk he couldn't justify to the Imperial command. "Break off," he ordered finally. "We've gathered sufficient intelligence on their capabilities." As the Imperial fist retreated into FTL, Krovak reviewed the battle recordings with growing unease. The humans hadn't won, but neither had they lost. Most concerning of all, they had shown no fear in the face of certain destruction. That made them unpredictable. And in Krovak's extensive experience, unpredictable enemies were the most dangerous kind. The Confederation Council chamber erupted in chaos minus 172 representatives from 17 species shouting over each other, while holographic displays showed the human Vorex engagement from multiple angles. The chamber itself, designed to soothe with its harmonious proportions and calming bioluminescence, couldn't contain the unprecedented diplomatic crisis unfolding within. High Counselor Ven Shar, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated extreme agitation, raised all four of her upper appendages to call for order. The chamber's acoustic enhancers amplify her harmonic voice above the din. "Esteemed representatives," she chimed, the crystalline resonance of her words designed to focus attention. "This situation requires clarity, not confusion." Gradually, the chamber quieted, though the emotional displays from various species, the Meklar's color-shifting skin, the Ulfid's agitated tentacles, the Eldar's vibrating antennae, made it clear that calm was merely surface deep. "The facts are these," Ven Shar continued. "A Confederation observation post was attacked by Vorex forces. Commander Zixar, acting against protocol, sent a distress signal to the humans. 3 human vessels responded and engaged the Vorex. Ambassador Trell of the methane-breathing Ulfid rose on his suspension platform, the environmental field around him clouding with anxiety pheromones. The data is clear," he bubbled through his translator. "No species with humanity's aggression coefficient has ever achieved stable interstellar civilization. Our predictive models gave them less than 200 cycles before self-destruction. This incident confirms our caution was warranted." Yet they came to the aid of an unknown alien without hesitation, countered Representative Locks of the aquatic Nari, Zixar's own species. Their medical technologies saved our commander when our models suggested his injuries were terminal. The debate halted when a Confederation security officer entered the chamber, her rigid posture signaling urgent information. "A Vorex diplomatic shuttle has requested emergency docking," she announced. "Their ambassador awaits the Council's pleasure." 20 minutes later, the Vorex ambassador, a high-ranking female whose exoskeleton bore the markings of both military service and noble lineage, stood before the Council. The chamber's environmental systems trained to process the aggressive pheromones she deliberately released, a traditional Vorex intimidation tactic. "The Empire has been attacked," she began without preamble, "by primitive vessels operating in what the Empire claims as its sovereign territory. Our observation post was in neutral space," Ven Shar countered, her crystalline form shifting to reflect skepticism. Your observation post was monitoring a species the Empire has already designated for eventual integration, the ambassador replied. Our scientific vessel was conducting legitimate research when these humans interfered. The chamber erupted again, representatives arguing over jurisdiction, evidence, and the appropriate response. Meanwhile, aboard the Confederation diplomatic cruiser Harmonious Discourse, Captain Rice and her senior officers found themselves in a different kind of confinement. Their quarters were luxurious by human standards, comfortable furnishings that adapted to human physiology, entertainment systems loaded with cultural works from across the Confederation, and exceptional food prepared by chefs who had studied human nutritional requirements and preferences. Yet force fields at every exit made it clear they were prisoners, regardless of the diplomatic term, honored guests. Callan Zhou, the ship's senior-most diplomat and a member of the ancient Eldar species, sat across from Reyes in what had been designated as a cultural exchange rather than an interrogation. You understand our dilemma, Zhou said, his translucent skin revealing the complex neural patterns of his species' thought processes. Your species wasn't supposed to know about us yet. Why not? Reyes asked directly, her calm demeanor masking her growing concern for both her crew and the wider implications for Earth. Historical data suggests that premature contact between species of disparate technological development leads to cultural collapse in 73.4% of cases, Zhou explained. The Confederation's first contact protocols were developed over thousands of years. Yet here we are, Reyes observed, having first contact anyway. Zhou's neural patterns shifted to a configuration Reyes couldn't interpret. The Eldar had proposed selective memory adjustment as the most efficient solution. The technology is quite humane. You would retain all your experiences, merely recontextualized as a rescue of unknown origin. Reyes smiled with unexpected calm. That sounds fascinating. We appreciate your concern for our cultural well-being. Would you mind if I use your communication array to check on my crew first? I want to ensure they're comfortable with the process. Her seemingly reasonable request, delivered with practiced innocence, earned her 5 unmonitored minutes with Confederation technology, a system vastly more advanced than human equivalents, yet surprisingly vulnerable to someone with Rice's specialized background in communication security. It took her less than 3 minutes to bypass the rudimentary user restrictions and send a heavily encrypted warning to Earth about both the Vorx threat and the Confederation's intentions. The message, compressed into a data packet disguised as system maintenance, would reach Earth long before the Confederation realized what she had done. As she was escorted back to her quarters, Reyes maintained her cooperative demeanor. The Confederation might have centuries of technological advancement, but they clearly lacked experience with the particular brand of resourcefulness that humans had developed over millennia of confronting their own extinction. The games of diplomacy and deception had only just begun. Dawn broke over New Horizons' primary settlement, sunlight glinting off hydroponic towers and atmospheric processors. The colony's 3 million inhabitants went about their morning with no awareness of the 7 Vorx warships that had just emerged from FTL at the system's edge. Governor Mai Chen stood at the window of her office, coffee mug in hand, watching workers assemble a new communications array. New Horizon was humanity's most distant colony, established just 15 years earlier around a promising Earth-like planet. Its distance from Earth had attracted pioneers, scientists, and those seeking independence from the more regulated inner colonies. The first warning came not as an alarm, but as an absence. Chen's personal communicator chimed with an automated message, satellite grid offline. Diagnostic in progress. System error. Ask her aide. Alex Capper, looking up from his morning briefing notes. Chen frowned. Unlikely. We just upgraded the entire network last month. She set down her coffee and moved to her terminal. Contact Defense Command. I want a status report immediately. Before Capper could respond, the building's emergency system activated, bathing the office in red light as the colony's AI spoke with artificial calm. Attention. Unknown vessels detected in outer system. Defense Protocol Theta initiated. This is not a drill. Chen's training took over. Activate the defensive grid. Begin civilian shelter protocols. I want all non-essential personnel underground within 30 minutes. The New Horizon defense grid was modest by inter-colony standards. A handful of orbital platforms, a squadron of atmospheric fighters, and ground-based missile systems designed more for asteroid defense than warfare. Against 7 Vorx warships, it would provide minutes of resistance, not hours. Unknown to the colonists, they were being observed from multiple angles. The Confederation observation post, hidden in the asteroid belt, and now on high alert, transmitted detailed scans of the Vorx fleet to the Council 60 light-years away. Their advanced sensors captured the moment the colony's limited defenses activated, a futile gesture against the overwhelming force approaching. In the Confederation Council, the Eldar representative, ancient even by his species standards, reviewed the incoming data with characteristic methodical precision. "We must follow proper procedure," he announced to the Emergency Committee. "Threat assessment will require 12 hours. Response formulation, 36 hours. Fleet mobilization, 96 hours. The humans will be defeated before we arrive," noted the Alphid ambassador clinically, tentacles manipulating holographic projections of the coming battle. "But we will gain valuable tactical data on Vorx capabilities." Only Representative Locks appeared disturbed by this calculus. "We're discussing 3 million sentient beings," he protested, his aquatic features rippling with emotion. "Not data points." "The humans knew the risks of extrasolar colonization," the Eldar replied. "All species face extinction pressures. It is the natural order." Back on New Horizon, Governor Chen stood in the colony's Defense Command Center, surrounded by screens showing the approaching Vorx fleet. The initial panic had given way to grim determination as shelter protocols were implemented with practiced efficiency. "We've evacuated 65% of the surface population," reported Defense Director Sato. "The rest should be underground within 2 hours." "Our defensive systems?" Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. 87 orbital mines, 2 defense platforms, and ground-based interceptors, Sato replied. "At best, we can slow them down." "The nearest UEF heavy cruiser. 4 days out at maximum burn." Chen nodded, absorbing the reality of their situation. "Then we make those 4 days count. Every hour we hold gives another 1,000 people a chance to reach the deep shelters." As the colony's limited defense grid powered up, communications operators detected an unusual signal rippling through subspace, a cascading activation of human emergency beacons stretching back toward Earth. The pattern was unlike anything in Confederation records, not centrally coordinated but spreading organically, ship to ship, colony to colony. Governor Chen's communicator chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender identification simply read, "Earth Command." The message itself contained just 8 words that brought both dread and hope. "Hostile vessels detected. Humans are on the way." Across human space, the response began. Civilian vessels altered course mid-journey without waiting for official orders. Partially constructed warships were towed from shipyards, still trailing power conduits and surrounded by construction drones. Mining vessels jettisoned valuable ore to increase speed. The Confederation observers recorded this unprecedented mobilization with disbelief. Their careful studies of human society had identified their fractious nature, their tendency toward individualism and competition. Yet now, they moved with singular purpose, sacrificing individual gain for collective action in a way that defied the Confederation's understanding of their psychology. More puzzling still were the jump points their vessels used, a network of FTL corridors that Confederation sensors hadn't even detected in their centuries of observation. Humanity, it seemed, had secrets of their own. As the Vorx fleet approached New Horizon, they remained unaware that what had seemed like an easy demonstration of imperial power was rapidly transforming into something else entirely. General Krovak's mandibles clicked in satisfaction as his fleet approached optimal bombardment range. The human colony, with its patchwork of environmental domes and exposed infrastructure, would make an excellent example of the price for defying the Vorx Empire. His flagship, now repaired after the skirmish with Captain Rice's small force, led the formation of 7 warships arranged in a classic Vorx attack pattern. "Begin targeting sequence," he ordered. "Prioritize defense installations, then infrastructure nodes." "General," his tactical officer interrupted, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures at the system's edge." Krovak didn't bother turning from the main view screen. "Elaborate." "Jump point activations, hundreds of them, surrounding the system in a 3-dimensional grid pattern." This caught the general's attention. The tactical display shifted to show the phenomenon. A spherical pattern of disruptions in space-time enveloping the entire star system. The pattern made no tactical sense, yet somehow left his fleet with no clear retreat path. "Impossible," he muttered. "Our intelligence indicated the humans have no significant military presence in this sector." The vessels emerging. The tactical officer's voice faltered. "They defy classification." The ships that appeared through the jump points represented not a cohesive fleet, but a chaotic assemblage of everything humanity could send into space. Massive cargo haulers with point defense turrets welded to their hulls, sleek scientific vessels trailing sensor-jamming buoys, passenger liners converted to troop transports, and warships, some clearly fresh from production, others bearing the scars of previous conflicts. "How many?" Krovak demanded. 400 and climbing," came the stunned reply. "Still emerging." The Vorx commander stared at the tactical display in disbelief. No species, not even the Confederation with its millennia of unified governance, could mobilize such numbers so quickly. The Vorx Intelligence Service had estimated humanity's total interstellar fleet at less than 200 vessels. "Open a channel to the human colony," he ordered. "Their surrender may yet prevent unnecessary losses." Before the communications officer could comply, the TACnet erupted with human transmissions, thousands of them on every frequency, completely overwhelming the Vorx communication systems. The messages weren't encrypted or centrally coordinated. Instead, they flowed in organized chaos, ships communicating directly with each other, sharing tactical data, volunteering for assignments, and constantly, endlessly, checking on each other. How were they doing this? Krovak demanded as his carefully orchestrated attack formation disintegrated under pressure from all sides. "There's no central command structure." The answer came inadvertently from one of the human transmissions that managed to penetrate the Vorx comm filters. "Fishing boat Stella Maris to any UEF vessel. We've got extra medical supplies and room for 20 wounded. Patching our location to the shared tactical." "Fishing boat," Krovak's executive officer repeated in confusion. "These are civilian vessels. Civilians with weapons." The tactical officer corrected as a modified mining vessel unleashed a barrage of industrial cutting lasers that sliced through a Vorx cruiser's sensor array. What followed defied every principle of warfare in the Vorx tactical database. The human vessels, military and civilian alike, fought not as individual units but as a single adaptive organism. When Vorx targeting systems locked onto a vulnerable transport, 3 smaller vessels would interpose themselves. When a human ship took critical damage, others would immediately move to evacuate its crew before using the disabled hull as cover, or, more disturbingly, as a kinetic weapon. A human mining vessel, its reinforced prow glowing from atmospheric entry, deliberately collided with one of the Vorx cruisers. As the ships fused together in superheated metal, the humans aboard transmitted a clear message. "We're keeping you busy while the colonists evacuate. How long can you hold out?" The question, asked by beings about to die, carried no fear. Only grim determination had unsettled the Vorx commander's confidence for the first time in his long career. "Pull back," Krovak ordered. "Regroup at coordinates Alpha 3. His flagship turned, only to find its path blocked by a phalanx of vessels that hadn't been there moments before. The tactical display identified them as Earth Defense Force heavy cruisers, the only purpose-built warships in the human armada, and therefore the only ones the Vorrex had prepared specific countermeasures for. Yet these cruisers didn't fight according to any known human doctrine. They held position, absorbing massive damage while smaller, faster ships darted between them in patterns that seemed random until Krovac realized they were targeting very specific systems on his vessels, not to destroy but to disable. "They're hurting us," he realized aloud, cutting off retreat vectors. A transmission cut through the chaos, directed specifically at his flagship. The face that appeared on the communication screen belonged to a human female, her features marked with age and authority unfamiliar to Vorrex hierarchy. "This is Admiral Helena Winters, Earth Defense Force," she stated without preamble. "Your fleet is surrounded. Your options are limited. I suggest you consider them carefully." Krovac's mandibles clicked in reflexive anger. The Vorrex Empire does not surrender. Admiral Winters nodded as if expecting this answer. "I'm not asking for surrender, General. I'm offering a chance for your crews to survive this encounter. The choice is yours." As she spoke, the tactical display updated with new information. Another wave of human vessels had arrived. These focused entirely on evacuating the colony below. The humans were simultaneously fighting his fleet and saving their people, dividing their forces in a way that defied conventional military logic, yet somehow worked. "How did you mobilize so quickly?" Krovac couldn't help asking. For the first time, Winters' expression changed, a slight curve of her lips that Krovac's cultural database identified as a smile. "When someone threatens our people," she replied simply, "humans find a way." Confederation observers, now joined by the full diplomatic court hastily assembled from nearby systems, watched in stunned silence as the battle entered its third day. Their tactical simulations had given the human defenders less than 6 hours before collapse. Yet the colonists of New Horizon had mostly evacuated to subterranean shelters, while the space above their world transformed into a graveyard of broken ships, human and Vorrex alike. "Impossible," murmured Senior Analyst Genvex, her crystalline form refracting patterns of disbelief as she reviewed the latest sensor data. "The humans should have exhausted their resources by now." Ambassador Trell floated beside her, his methane environment field clouding with calculation pheromones. "They're operating at 43% efficiency compared to our combat doctrine. Their resource expenditure is catastrophically inefficient. Yet they continue," noted Representative Locks, watching as human vessels, many damaged beyond what Confederation safety protocols would permit for operation, continued coordinated maneuvers against the remaining Vorrex warships. The battle had settled into a grueling war of attrition. The Vorrex fleet, reduced to 4 operational vessels, maintained a defensive perimeter while attempting to target the colony's critical infrastructure. The human armada, despite heavy losses, continued to press their advantage, not with overwhelming force, but with relentless, coordinated pressure that allowed no respite. On the colony below, Governor Chen coordinated from a hardened command center built into a natural cave system beneath the central dome. Holographic displays showed the status of each shelter, evacuation zone, and defensive emplacement. "Primary environmental system hit," reported her operations officer. "Atmosphere in the main dome is venting." Chen's expression remained steady despite the catastrophic news. "Activate emergency seals." "How many people are still in that section?" 8,000, mostly medical personnel and patients from Central Hospital. "Divert all available shuttles to evacuation points Delta through Kilo," Chen ordered. "Priority to critical care patients." Even as she spoke, the tactical situation in orbit shifted dramatically. A stray Vorrex torpedo breached the colony's main atmospheric dome, the explosion visible from space as breathable air vented into the thin atmosphere of the planet. The battle shifted from calculated attrition to something the Confederation had no word for: Human ships deliberately positioned themselves to create shield walls of twisted metal protecting the exposed colony, absorbing Vorx fire, meant for the vulnerable evacuation shuttles. Civilian vessels sacrificed themselves without hesitation, their crews choosing certain death to buy minutes for strangers on the surface below. Aboard the UES Defiant, now scared almost beyond recognition after 3 days of continuous combat, Captain Rice studied the tactical display with eyes red from exhaustion. She had escaped Confederation protection through means their security division was still trying to understand, rejoining the battle at a critical juncture. The Vorx flagship is concentrating fire on evacuation corridors, reported Lieutenant Kim, his voice hoarse from hours of continuous updates. Their targeting pattern suggests they've identified the command bunker. Rice nodded, her decision already made. Helm, bring us around to heading 340, Mark II. Engineering, give me everything the engines have left. Captain, First Officer Malik objected. Our structural integrity is at 26%. Another direct hit will breach the reactor containment. I'm aware, David, she replied quietly. But those evacuation shuttles are carrying children. The simple statement hung in the air, requiring no further explanation to her human crew. The Confederation observers monitoring the command frequency, however, noted it as yet another example of human illogic, sacrificing a valuable military asset for civilians who contributed little to immediate tactical advantage. The Defiant accelerated toward the Vorx flagship, executing a maneuver considered theoretically impossible, matching velocity while inverted, creating a perfect alignment of airlocks. The massive dreadnought, its weapons focused on the colony below, failed to prevent the human vessel from the Confederation fleet arrived at New Horizon to find an impossible scene, the Vorx in full retreat, their remaining vessels limping toward the jump point with critical damage to propulsion and weapon systems. The colony, though scared by orbital bombardment, remained intact. The space around the planet was littered with debris and rescue operations led by vessels that looked like they should barely be spaceworthy. Admiral Lox Prin, the Confederation Task Force commander, stood on the bridge of the flagship Harmonious Accord, her elongated fingers tracing patterns of confusion in the air as she reviewed the sensor data. Confirmed casualties, she asked her executive officer. Vorx forces, 3 capital ships destroyed, 4 severely damaged. Human forces, approximately 130 vessels destroyed or disabled, casualties estimated at 20,000. Lox Prin's respiratory slits fluttered in shock. 20,000. From a colony of 3 million? And they continued fighting. There's more, the executive officer added. We're receiving a transmission from the surface. It appears to be an invitation. An invitation, she repeated, certain the translation must be incorrect. Yes, Admiral, to what they're calling an emergency diplomatic conference at the New Horizon Government Center. 2 hours later, Admiral Lox Prin found herself descending through New Horizon's atmosphere aboard a Confederation diplomatic shuttle. The colony below bore the unmistakable scars of orbital bombardment, cracked environmental domes hastily patched, fields of debris being cleared by teams of workers, temporary medical facilities set up in open areas. The government center, a modest structure partially buried in a hillside, had survived the attack with minimal damage. Inside, Lox Prin found a scene that defied her expectations. Captain Rice, uniform torn and face bruised, presided over a gathering that included human colonial officials, ship captains still wearing battle armor, and, most surprisingly, the captured General Krovac, the Vorx commander, his exoskeleton dented and one limb clearly broken, sat at the conference table with what the Admiral's cultural database identified as the human emotion of resigned respect. Admiral, Rice greeted her with a tired but genuine smile. Thank you for coming. We were hoping you could help with translation. We're negotiating the terms of the Vorx withdrawal from this sector. Negotiating. Lox Prin couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. You've captured a Vorx general. Which is why negotiation is possible. Rise explained as if it were obvious. The remaining Vorek ships won't leave without him, and we'd prefer not to destroy them if unnecessary. The stunned admiral watched as these supposedly primitive humans conducted sophisticated diplomatic negotiations while simultaneously coordinating rescue operations and battlefield triage with equal skill. The Voreks, a species known across the galaxy for their intransigence, were actively compromising, motivated not by fear, but by a grudging respect for human tenacity. 3 weeks later, the full Confederation Council convened an emergency session. The chamber, still bearing hasty repairs from the earlier diplomatic confrontation, buzzed with conversation as representatives reviewed the complete data from New Horizon. High Counselor Ven Char called the session to order, her crystalline form pulsing with formal patterns that demanded attention. Esteemed representatives, she began, we face an unprecedented situation. For the first time in our 10,000-year history, I propose we waive the standard observation period for a new species. The motion should have provoked hours of debate. Instead, it passed with unanimous consent in less than 20 minutes. The official record noted the motivation. Any species capable of such technical improvisation, tactical flexibility, and above all, unflinching sacrifice for both their own kind and unknown aliens represents either an existential threat, if hostile, or an unprecedented asset if allied. When Captain Rice, now bearing the title of ambassador, entered the council chambers 1 month later, she wore a formal uniform that concealed her still healing injuries. The assembled representatives fell silent as she approached the central podium, a place usually reserved for species with centuries of Confederation membership. Honored representatives, she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. I bring greetings from Earth and all human colonies. She paused, looking around at the diverse assemblage of species, many physically unlike humans in every way, yet connected by the universal constants of intelligence and emotion. We came to the stars seeking wonders and knowledge, she continued, but we brought with us something every bit as valuable. The absolute certainty that when danger threatens, when hostile vessels are detected, humans will always find a way through. And now we're on our way to building something greater than any of us could achieve alone, together. As the chamber erupted in the various sounds of approval from 17 different species, Zixar, newly appointed as liaison to humanity, reflected on the distress signal that had started it all. He had broken protocol, risked censure, and trusted strangers. The humans had responded by changing the galaxy.